Hello, beautiful humans. A quick precursor before we jump into this actual video. This is a review of a book I was sent in the mail by a self-published author, Evan Witmer. It is called Pages from the Pizza Crows. And this book discusses very heavy topics such as sexual assault and very gruesome murder. If discussing a topic like that is highly triggering for you, do not watch the rest of this video. Do not read this book. In the end, I'm giving this book 3 stars, and it's definitely something good. But I would not recommend it to everybody. That being said, let's get into the review. Great. Oh, she appears. Hello. I was sent a copy of Pages from the Pizza Crows from Evan Witmer. Shout out to you. Thank you so much for sending me a free copy of this. He asked me to do an honest review on my channel. That's what we're gonna do. I'm sorry it took me so long to film this video, but I don't have my shit together, and anyone who tells you different is lying. But first, if you're new here, my name is Logan, and welcome to the Bi Book Boy. I'm a chaotic bisexual. I read books. I review them early in the morning, often, when I am no longer caffeinated. Let's get into it. So I went into this book relatively blind, which I would say is not a good idea, because it's kind of a roller coaster. Pages from the Pizza Crows is a collection of short stories that are all tethered together. They're the genre odd fiction, we will say, which I didn't really know what that meant, but from the back of the book I was like, so it sounds kind of like Princess Bride. Anyway, they're like a collection of short stories that are odd fiction, and they are connected by an unnamed narrator who is receiving these stories handwritten and delivered by birds. The author works at a pizza factory, pizza delivery company, something like that. He works for a pizza restaurant, and he leaves his leftovers in his open window because he doesn't have air conditioning. And birds start stealing his food and leaving short stories for him to read in exchange, which I think is brilliant. It is, the concept of this book is so funny. I was really excited to read this book. I did not expect all of the short stories to be horror. And that really threw me for a loop. Because I was criticizing a lot of these things under the, comedy lens. Because the interjections with the Pizza Crow storyline are all they're all comedic. When the first horrifying thing happened, I had to sit down for a sec and was like, wait a sec, are we trying to say that this is funny? What? And as I read through, I got about halfway through and went, oh, this is a horror novel. Okay. And then I restarted and reread it because I am not the brightest, guys. Overall, the concept of all of the short stories is they're all really cool concepts and really interesting ideas to explore, and I enjoyed sitting with those concepts. However, as we'll see when I discuss this further, I think a lot of these stories deserve further development, and I honestly could make 300-page novels out of all of these stories and want them to be made into those. And I think because Evan Witmer was trying to discuss some very interesting ideas in a very short amount of time, the dialogue suffered a bit in certain parts, and I think there are certain messages that it took a second to get to, and the journey that it took to get to said messages was a little bit concerning. So I'm going to give this book 3 stars because it is a fun read. However, it is definitely not for everybody. These stories are very strange. It is also a hard read in that all of the stories are very heavy in the end, and it's multiple different stories that are not really connected, so it takes a second to like process it. Most books this size would have taken me like 2 or 3 days to read, and this book took me like 2 weeks. Not just because it's multiple short stories, because I do read short stories slower for some reason, but also just because I'm awful at focusing and I am really bad at time management, and it's fine. Anyway, let's get into it. ASMR. You guys, I wonder if maybe technically all of my videos count as mukbangs. Mukbangs? I don't know how you're supposed to say it. I'm not a big ASMR person, but I wonder if they all kind of count as that, because I do drink either tea, coffee, or eggnog in every single one of my videos because I am an addict. Okay, let's focus. Brief outline. Non-spoiler review is over. We're gonna talk light spoilers. Stick with me if you're considering buying or not buying this book, because I think I'm gonna give you some pertinent information that you need before you approach this book. We're gonna talk pros, then we're gonna talk cons. Also in there, we're gonna sprinkle in my most favorite. No, that's correct. That's correct grammar. Favorite story, least favorite story, reasons why. And then we're going to talk criticisms of this book and why I didn't give it 5 stars, because I think if this had a little bit more time to develop, it could have been a really solid 5-star novel, and I think the concept could be a really solid 5-star novel. Pros. Mr. Witmer. This Pizza Crow character that is the unspoken narrator and interjects between most of the short stories in reflecting like a commentary of sorts, was so funny. The pizza dude was my favorite part of this novel. He was hilarious. He was sarcastic. At points, he starts experimenting with like the flavors and the ingredients and the temperature that the pizza is cooked at, seeing how he can use the ingredients to manipulate the outcome of the stories. And it was just so brilliant and so smart. And I looked forward to getting back to my pizza dude and his mysterious crows. Similarly, my favorite story in this one would have been the young adult series Simulator. Half of the short story is told from the point of view of, it's like I don't know if it's first person direct or whatever. I'm so bad at the POV descriptions, you guys, but it's the one where the author is like, you open your book and you yada yada yada. Follows a dude who is us. We're being told that we are him on a date. While you're on this date, you're reading a young adult book, a young adult series that's like very stereotypical young adult, like the gods and the goddesses are doing all kinds of shit, and it's honestly kind of felt like a stab at Percy Jackson, and I found that so funny. And it was really good, especially the part where like it's the dude on the date, or it's us on the date. That was so well written, and the ability to like keep a comedic tone there while discussing very important things such as surviving a relationship and healing from trauma. I loved that. If I could have an entire novel of the Pizza Crow dude and then this dude that's on the date, I would, and I would pay so much money for it because I loved it. The other half of that story that involved like the actual plot of the gods, or of the young adult book, was funny. It was entertaining. It wasn't my favorite thing, but it was good. Similarly, my other favorite story here is a story called Captured by Animals. Now the description on the back is, this details an author's adventures, spying on people in the woods to write his romance novels. This story was where I went, oh, this is all gonna be about criminals, and which I'm down for. We all know I love a good morbid story because it's like first person, just regular first person, like, I do this, yada yada. I'm an author. I spy on people in the woods to get my dialogue. And for a hot sec, any of the dialogue that this author could get was very soap opera-ish, and none of the situations that these young couples were in were realistic, and I was getting a little skeptical and a little bit tired of it. And then I realized, about halfway through the story, spoiler alert, we find out that this author, this character in this short story, the author who's writing the books, is a bear. And I mean a real animal bear, who, after having come across drugs in a garbage can, like edibles or something, has now developed the human consciousness and is a self-aware bear. And that made everything so much funnier. And through the perception of this bear spying on people in the woods, we observe the nuances of such things as human sexuality, kink culture, jealousy in relationships, non-traditional relationships. It was interesting. And while I'm not sure I understood what the takeaway was supposed to be there, it was really fun to listen to a bear talk about those things. Now let's talk cons. Reasons why we didn't give 5 stars. Reasons why I wouldn't recommend this book to everybody. I do think because this is a short story and there wasn't a lot of time to really develop a lot of the characters that we were meeting, the dialogue suffered here in certain stories. And it was to the detriment of the ideas, because the ideas here were really cool, such as the second story, case in point. There's a story called Polygamy. It is about a bunch of men who are going through midlife crises. The other men are like unhappy in their marriages, really not treating their wives well. Common things that happen to couples that are in their midlife crisis stages. They wake up one day and Rapture style, they are the only people left on the block. Everybody else is gone. The wives are gone. In the place of where their wives would be in bed, there is a weapon. And they are forced to Battlestar Galactica fight themselves to the death, to get their wives back from this unseen force, which is a cool concept. And I think what Evan Witmer was going for here was like an interesting discovery of how detrimental it is to give up on your marriage, and how marriages work, and appreciating your partner is something that needs to happen. However, because it is a short story and it is a male-centric story, and the only women involved are being spoken about and not spoken to, or not like physically there, sometimes the dialogue verged on sounding a bit misogynist. The way these men viewed their wives made it sound a bit 1965 women are property sort of thing, which is not what we are here for, and I don't think what Evan Witmer was going for. However, it did come across that way. I understand the concept is all the wives are gone and you have to like atone for what you've done to them to fight back, to get them back. However, this is a concept that needed more pages to fully flesh out, and as we didn't have those pages, it rode the line between deep and thought-provoking and straight-up offensive, and I think that is, when moving forward in said short stories, that might be something to take a red pen through, you know? Similarly, we move to what I thought was going to be my favorite story, the Red Constellation. This story deserves a lot more development and about 100 more pages to create what I think you were going for here. I'm going to completely spoil this short story for people. I think to have an actual discussion about this short story, which I am pulling up my notes right now on my laptop, we're gonna need to talk details. This I love the concept of this story. I am, as a huge raging feminist myself, I am very here for this. Red Constellation is about a girl named Serena who's comes from a line of women who have all been sexually assaulted, and through her own adventures decides that she is going to hunt down rapists and kill them. And that is really cool. I'm here for that. That is Buffy the Vampire Slayer level, like, so cool as a concept. Now, at this point, I'm going to talk to the author directly, and I'm going to give a little bit of harsh criticism, just because I think with looking at the topics that you decided to tackle in this book, you can handle it, and I want you to continue writing stories that discuss things like this, so we need to find a way to make it better. This story needed to be longer, and the dialogue and ideas needed to be developed more, because while I appreciate the slap you in the face, blunt sort of ideas in the other story, when discussing a topic so visceral as sexual assault, that is going to turn off a lot of people that could read to the end of the story and actually appreciate the message that you are putting out and the idea that you were discussing. Some of the dialogue, some of the concepts presented sounded misogynist at the beginning, and I almost stopped reading at this halfway through the story because the concepts were not as developed as I wish they were, and I was misunderstanding them to be really misogynist. Now I know, having read the end of this short story, that it is not. You are not misogynist. You did not mean for this to be misogynist. In fact, you meant the opposite, and I really appreciate that. i.e., let me read directly from the book here. Quick backstory. At the end of this short story, Serena, the main character, discovers that her ancestor, the reason her lineage has been constantly assaulted is because a group of old men in cahoots with the stars and given a lot of power in the world made a deal with the stars and the gods to sacrifice the well-being of those women for their own power, and are thusly complacent and allowing the sexual assault to continue. So she starts killing them instead, which the idea of a young woman killing old men in power who are complacent to the problems that they have contributed to in society is awesome. And at the very last paragraph says, every now and then Serena would feel a bit of guilt when staring into the eyes of one of these suffocating astro geeks. But after enough drinks, she always found a way to let it go. I mean, after all, how innocent were these guys really? They were colluding with alien forces, so they were clearly asking for it. Don't put on a space talisman and sacred robes if you are not looking for a fight. If they are really so innocent, they never would have been searching through space to begin with. And the fact that you took the argument of, well, look at what she was wearing, and the lifestyle she leads comes with a certain amount of risk, so I think we can't be too sympathetic. The arguments that are used to justify and blame the victims of sexual assault all the time, and you turned those around on old religious leaders, was so cool. And and made me understand that you meant to tear down the arguments used to blame victims of sexual assault. However, that was just a paragraph, and a lot of the dialogue before, specifically coming from the old religious leader who at first was framed to be like a raisonnoir or whatever. I don't know the actual French pronunciation of that word, but the old wise person who's supposed to be like the guide. A lot of that just discussing the idea that because of a curse, her ancient relatives were destined to be assaulted, and so was she, came off as saying that she was asking for it, or came off as victim blaming, and that idea, being early on in the story and not seeing the ending, would be enough to turn people off. Also, there is later on, when discussing the fact that it was given by the stars and the gods a duty on these men to be assaulters. I understand that you were saying it was due to the complacency of the religious leaders that these men were allowed to be assaulters. But when a character just says it's their duty, that it's the duty of these men to assault people, and there's no deeper exploration of that concept, it's enough to turn readers off and make some people, i.e. myself, stop reading for a bit, because I almost stopped reading right then and there. I was like, that's not something I want to sit with. Similarly, there was a line when discussing the duty being passed down, where you said the only thing that qualified these men to be assaulters was the fact that they had a dick. And that is, I know you did not mean this, but that can be misconstrued as saying that only men can be sexual assaulters, sexual abusers, and only women can be sexually abused. And that is not true, and that is a dangerous idea to put into the universe. While I get, having now read the end of the story, that this was a very feminist idea and a really cool concept for the short story, I think this is a topic that needed to be discussed in a not so short story, with a lot more development as to the ideas and a little bit less abrasive dialogue. Because you verged on sounding misogynist, and you could have turned off a lot of readers that would read this book and go into it blind like I did. And that is why I do not recommend any survivors of sexual assault to read this book. I do not recommend that. Skip it. We're going to end with, please continue to keep writing. I would love to read more of your other stories, especially if you create another collection. However, when creating future collections of short stories, I would say less is more. This book could have benefited from a smaller amount of short stories with more time and page numbers dedicated to the ideas in said stories. I think had that happened, it would have bumped it up to a 4-star for me. I want to know more about this Pizza Crow dude. I want to know more about him and the crows, because that was great. But anyway, if you made it to the end of this video, thanks for sticking around and helping out. Stormy has disappeared, but she says hello to everybody. If you are a self-published author out there, or a non-self-published author, if you are a publisher, publishing house or whatever, you're watching this, please send me books to read. I love free books. And I love reading things, and I love having a critical eye. That's all I got for you. Thanks for what turned out to be a deeper discussion than I usually have on these things. Thanks for sticking around and helping out. If you want more semi-regular chaotic bisexual content, hit the subscribe button, hit that like button, ring that notification bell so you can get my videos whenever I decide to post them. This has been the Bye Book Boy, and I'm saying bye.